Good morning, everyone. We're just going to wait another minute or two before we get started. You just heard it, and I'll say it again, but we are recording this session, just so you know. Getting everything up here. Now I can see the chat. Okay, Rebecca, you may want to mute yourself.
Yeah.
Love your background, though. That is gorgeous. Okay, well, for those of you who were so incredibly timely, we're going to go ahead and get started. So let me introduce myself first. My name is Jill Halvack, and I worked my entire career, which is unheard of probably anymore, at UC Irvine, and I retired about 9 years ago now. I will share a little bit more of my story later, and as part of all this sharing. And then I did want to thank you all for attending. We will be taking questions at the end and hope to have a dialogue and answer as many questions as we can. So please just put your questions or comments in the chat, and I will be moderating and making sure that, all of the panelists know what's been asked, and people, they can jump in willy-nilly, as we'll want to do, and, comments on that. So again, for those of you who just joined, we are recording this session. So let me go ahead and get started. Again, thanks for attending the session. We have, in addition to myself, I happen to be a retiree. Leah Jarnigan is with us, and she's going to introduce herself in a minute, but I wanted to let you know that both Leah and I worked on this session together. I've done this session kind of trying to figure things out the last 2 years by myself, and it was wonderful to have Leah join me this year. So appreciate that. We also have Gary and Henry. So it's the three of you. Maybe we'll start with Leah, can just do a brief introduction before we kind of go into sharing our stories. That would be great.
Terrific. Good morning, friends, new and known. We are so happy to see you this morning and appreciate you joining us for this session, which is a part of our Careers and Student Affairs Month. So thank you for being here. My name is Leah Jarnigan. I use she, her, hers pronouns. And like Jill, I did spend the entirety of my career in the same system, just not at the same campus. So I spent 30 years in the California State University system, serving on 3 Southern California campuses, including San Marcos, Fullerton, and Pomona, before sunsetting my career with a short stint of 3 years at the Chancellor's office in Long Beach. I'm really happy to see you all this morning and excited to have this conversation.
And Leah, when did you retire?
Thank you so much, Jill. Apparently long enough now that I've forgotten how to follow instructions. I retired actually December of last year. So I am very much a newbie, not quite a year yet.
Great. Okay, why don't we go to Henry?
Good morning, everybody. Good to see you. My name is Henry G. I retired in June of 2020 after 41 years of work in higher education. And I would say that I spent my first 15 years at Azusa Pacific University, and then I transitioned to the community college system where I spent 10 years at Santa Ana College. And my last 16 years I spent as vice president at Rio Hondo College before I retired. And so 3 institutions, 41 years, and loved what I did, loved what I continue to do. And I will talk about that later, and I'll stop there for now.
Henry, did I miss when you retired? How long you been retired?
Since June of 2020.
2020. Okay, great, thanks. Gary?
I'm the old man of the group. And I during the course of my career, I spent time at 6 different colleges and universities.
Oh, wow.
The last 30, however, at Arizona State University. I retired in 2008. I've been retired for 14 years now. and I highly recommend retirement.
Oh, that's great.
Did I get all the questions right?
I think so, Gary.
Okay.
Thanks. All right. So for those of you listening in, the group got together yesterday for a bit and decided that kind of sharing their story, taking a few minutes, maybe 7 to 10 each. And I may have to cut some of them off. They've already given me permission, just so all of you watching know that. So I'm going to jump in, and I think what we'll do is start backwards. So Gary, because you've been out the longest, if you can talk, if you can start us off, and just so you all that are listening, what we talked about yesterday in talking about retirement was intentions for retirement, what we ended up doing, and maybe at the very end, some reflections on the options that you all had and kind of how they're panning out, perhaps. So go ahead, Gary.
Okay. When I retired in 2008, I really didn't have a lot of intentions. I just knew that I was starting a new chapter in my life, and I was starting sort of with a blank book, and I wanted to find out what this new life was going to be about. So for the first time in my life, I retired at age 63. At age 63, I said, I'm not going to have anything. I had spent my entire adult life since age 18 involved with higher education, except for a short break when I served in the military in Vietnam. And so higher education is all I knew. And so I said, okay, for 1 year, I will have absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with the university. I went out there and I tried to figure out what the heck I was going to do with my life for the rest of it, and experimented with all different kinds of things. And I discovered that there's all kinds of people out there who don't know about the university, don't care about the university. They have lied. I met, there are people Republicans, people I'd never known before. I mean, all kinds of folks that were out there in the world. And it was a real eye-opening experience for me. I retired in 2008, so I had a chance. I volunteered on the Obama campaign. I did several different kinds of things that I hadn't done before. I served on some boards. I was asked to serve on some board, but I didn't do anything with the university for a year. After a year, I would go back, and I volunteered for several different kinds of things. But it was that year for me, a year of discovery. Like I said, I volunteered for all kinds of things, some of which I still enjoy doing today, some of which I will never ever do again. But it was that period of experimentation. As you look at retirement, there are 4 things that, and we teach our students this when we're working with our students, but we often don't do it ourselves. And so physical activity, had to figure out what kind of physical activity I was going to be involved with, but I know I needed physical activity. Social interaction. One of the big things about working was the social interaction with our friends and colleagues, and needed to figure out how to do that. I started a lunch group with my former colleagues, and so that there's that social interaction that's really important. Intellectual stimulation. One of the things you get working at a college university is you do get intellectual stimulation simply because of the environment you're in. So you needed to plan for that. You need to figure out what you needed to do in terms of intellectual stimulation. And then for some of us, and not so much for others, there's the spiritual element, which we needed to figure out in terms of what it is we're going to do or not do, and how we wanted to do that, and how we wanted to take care of that. And part of it too is identity. So much of our personal identity was tied up with our work lives. I was Professor Kleeman, I was Dr. Kleeman, I was whatever I was. And all of a sudden, I'm Gary at the grocery store pushing the cart, trying to figure out what kind I'm going to buy. And so it's a whole different realm. It's a whole different way of looking at things. And so figuring out what kind of identity you were or you wanted to be, but you weren't what you were before. And last, I'll just touch on it briefly, finances. When I first retired, I'm not going to get a paycheck. How the hell is this going to work? I can't, I mean, my God, you know, and yet I had spent years and years and years of planning and saving and trying to figure out what I was going to do. And it all for me has worked out just fine. But that's because I had spent time in advanced planning. But that first year I was really nervous. And you know, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? And so if you're getting ready to retire next year and you haven't started planning your finances, gee, I'm sorry. But if you're in your 20s or 30s or 40s or in your 50s, you better start planning your financial future, because it's really, really important. And by the way, just remember, just so you folks, maybe you remember, maybe you don't, but 2008 was the year of the Great Recession. That's when I retired. It was scary, but it all worked out, and it's just fine. But finances are really, really important in terms of your overall setup for retirement. So what have I done since? I've become involved. I've ended up serving on a number of committees and boards and community involvement. Right now, here in San Diego, I'm serving on 2 different boards. I'm spending more time than I or my wife would like me to do, but that's the way, you know, you get yourself involved with one thing after another, and then they ask you to serve on other kinds of things. And so volunteering in the community. I love teaching, and I'm still teaching, but I no longer teach for pay. I'll do guest lectures. I do volunteer stuff. I've become involved with a local community college in terms of their lifelong learning program, teaching seniors. I've taken many of the leadership courses that I taught to undergraduate and graduate students and modified them for leadership for seniors, and doing things like that. I've taken on projects of things that were not in my area of academic expertise, and I teach a course on the national debt. I mean, you know, who would have thought? There's all kinds of things but that's me doing me. And the one thing about retirement that's really, really key is you are in charge of you. Nobody is telling you, got to check in got to do this, no, you don't need any of that stuff unless you want to. And that's really the key. You are in charge of you. And when you get up in the morning, you can say, well, gee, what would I like to do today? And just, you know, you better have some things in mind to do. That's all. Sitting in front of it and watching TV all day is not the kind of life I want. So I have physical activities. I play golf. I you know, and volunteer, all these things. And so I'll just leave it at that. I'm sure you all will have questions.
Thanks, Gary. That was actually unplanned, but a great way to start, because you made that transition and are very involved, but you didn't come back and consult. You didn't come back and be part, you know, take another gig.
Actually,
the Harry Legrand method. Right?
I did some consulting and some of that kind of stuff, and said, gee, you know, I really don't want to, I don't want to have to write a report. I'm glad to go and consult, but don't pay me. Just let me come and see what you're doing, and I'll be glad to give you my opinion verbally, and I might write something down, but I don't, you know, that's not what I want to do.
That's great.
And so
yeah, there we are. Okay, I'm gonna I think I'm gonna save Leah for last, because she's just been out a couple months, so I'm gonna jump to Henry.
Sure. Well, thanks, Gary, for sharing, and I appreciate what you had to say. I will start off by clarifying that you said, you know, you're in charge of you. I said, you haven't met my wife then, have you?
well,
I was going to say that, and Jill, you can tell her what I said. You know, the intentions for retirement, I had made that announcement. I retired in June of 2020, but when my daughter was finishing high school, I let people know then, which is she graduated in 2016 from high school. I'd said in 2015, my daughter walks in May of 2020, I will be 1 month behind her into retirement. And I said that. And my staff thought I was joking. And then when my daughter was like in the middle of college, they go, you're serious, aren't you? I said, sure, I'm very serious. I plan on retiring when she graduates, because I'm not going to pay for private school tuition when I'm in retirement. So I waited until she graduated, and then I retired. And I stuck to that. And I can tell you, and I make very clear about this, I retired in June of 2020, and my 41st year, I worked for the worst president I worked for in 41 years. So it didn't So people say, "Oh, you retired because you couldn't stand the guy." I said, "I announced 5 years, a year before he even got here. He was only been here less than a year. It wasn't had to do with him, but I wouldn't." Someone asked me if he was a great president and asked you to stay, would you have stayed? I said, probably would have, but he wasn't, and there was no desire to stay on any longer. And then my daughter pulled a fast one on me, and a good fast one. She actually finished in December of 19, so she finished a semester early, and I was thrilled with that. I thought, oh. And since I was not having a good time with this president, I thought about in the middle of the fall semester, should I go ahead and retire in December? Because it won't make a difference to me retirement wise. And what convinced me to stay was my staff. My staff said, "You promised us till June 2020. Please stay with us till June 2020." So I focused on working a lot with my staff, did my best to ignore the president, and was able to finish my last year in somewhat, I consider, decent fashion, and worked hard at it, but was ready to go. My intention for retirement was to also start my own consulting firm. I said, you know what, I'm going to start my own consulting firm. I've talked to quite a few colleagues of mine who said, we'll join with you. We'll have a great consulting firm. One guy was going to do all the search stuff. One guy was going to do all the interim stuff. And I was going to be just hanging out and trying to figure all the little pieces together. And then the third thing I was going to do was I'm going to learn how to play golf. I've golfed hardly at all my lifetime. I played softball, I played tennis, and my golf swing looks like one of the hybrid between those two swings. So I decided to take golf lessons, and I did. What did I do when I retired, though? 2 months into my retirement, I was offered an opportunity to come back and serve as an executive director of the foundation at Rio Hondo College, where I last worked part-time. And so I accepted that in September of 2020. Only reason I accepted it because the president who I disliked was let go. And so, because they'd asked me to stay on with the foundation, I said, no, I don't want to work for that president. When he left, I got a phone call the very next day in July, and I said, no, let's see what actually happens before I decide to come back. And so when I came back in September, I started working for the foundation. I'm still working for them currently until this December, where I have promised myself to walk away completely. And I did take 3 months worth of golf lessons, and I've been playing for the last couple of years. And I can tell you that I'm consistently inconsistent. I'm not a very good golfer, but at least I know now what I do wrong, but I still can't correct it.
I'm with you.
Yeah, so I need to do that. And so the reflections about my options, I stuck to my plan of retirement when I said I would, and I don't regret that at all, because I had a wonderful, like I said, worst president I worked for in my 41-year career, but juxtapose that with the best staff I had in 41 years. And so that's what brought me joy. That's what made me happy about my job. I could ignore the other person and just focus on my team. And I acknowledge it was the best team I ever had in my life. If some of you know these people, I've had superstars on my team, the Shohei Otanis, the Mike Trouts. I've had the good fortune of working with John Hernandez, Mike Munoz, and Daryl Foster. All three are college presidents now. And so those are superstars. But when I retired, I didn't really have what I consider superstars. I had a lot of stars, a lot of starters. Nobody was a bench player that just sat on the bench and waited to come in. So they were all great. And so I had assembled what I consider the strongest team I had in 41 years. Albeit I did have superstars before, but they were saddled with some people who weren't necessarily superstars or stars or even starters. So that was great. I already told you about my golf game, which I'm not going to talk about. I chose not to start the consulting firm because, kind of like what Gary said, I didn't want to work that hard in as far as writing reports and having, scheduled meetings and all these different things. And, I had talked to a consultant about how do I start my own firm. I've had a couple of good friends of mine who've done some great work with consulting, and Leah knows both of them. Joy and Joel are doing amazing work, and I really respect them for that. It wasn't for me. I just realized it wasn't for me. And part of that's because I have always coached and mentored people my whole career and still do. And so it is something I still do, but I didn't want to take on new people just to take them on and have to create the relationship. What I continue to do, though, is as people are referred to me, I might have a single conversation with them. And if I like them, I might have a second or third conversation with them. But for the most part, I have like an introductory conversation and I move on. I suggest that they find a coach or find a mentor to continue on. But it's interesting because the people that are referring people to me are people I have often mentored in the past. And so, matter of fact, I have a phone call, I think, in another week or so with someone that was referred to me from our dear friend, Jill Sunny. So she was a student leader for Sunny a few years ago, and she referred her to me, and said, would you please take the time to speak with her? And I said, sure. So we've been contacting each other. And so we have scheduled a meeting. That's what I do as far as I don't want to do consulting on a for pay basis. I will talk to obviously a student of a friend and talk to them at least one time, possibly two or three. And beyond that, I don't want to be forced into a relationship. And again, if it develops into one, that's great, but I don't go seeking them out anymore because I have plenty of friends that I love to work with already, and I keep it at that. And then, like I said, I finished my executive director position this December. I gave the board a warning last November that I was walking away in June. They extended me for 3 more months to September to run the foundation golf tournament, which I did. A new president started, who I really do like, and she said, please just stay till December to give me a chance to do the transition. And so and it was on her 50th birthday when she brought me a piece of cake from her birthday cake saying, Henry, just 3 months so I can do the transition. So I said, for your 50th birthday, I will stay for 3 more months, but I promise you at the end of December, I am walking whether your transition is done or not. And so that's been very clear. I'm going to walk away and try to stay away for at least 6 months. I'm still on the NASPA Foundation board, which I really enjoy working on. I'm on the board with Leah. That's a pure joy because I see so many colleagues and friends. And I'm on that. I think I'm on the board until 24, and I'll walk away from that. I'll still attend NASPA when I can, but I'm not going to commit. Like this coming March will be only the second national or annual conference that I'll miss in the last 35 years. So I rarely miss a NASPA annual, but keep my fingers crossed during the annual NASPA in Boston in April, which is very late. I should be somewhere in Australia during that time. So the vacation or the planned trip that we had for retirement was postponed obviously because of COVID, and it's been postponed for well over 2 years. So we're finally going to take the trip. And I'll stop there. And hopefully I stay within time. Jill hasn't cut me off yet.
It's so funny. I just put my cursor over my unmute button to say, and now, Henry, we are going to, that was perfect. Great. Okay, so we're hopping over to Leah.
Great. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, Gary and Henry, I've just been reflecting on your comments and finding so many common themes, right? About retirement is not a decision you make that you do once and then you're done. Retirement is a journey. Retirement is a process. And it's something that is decided upon most specifically around your personal life. That has been my experience. And your personal life, by that, what I mean is all your personal circumstances, right? Your work life, your home life, your health life, your financial life, your spiritual life. It's about all of that. So I mentioned in the beginning that I spent the entirety of my 30 years in higher ed in the CSU system. And that is something that I love. It is in my DNA. It is where I achieved my goal of a college education, which took me 10 years to get my undergraduate degree. It's also where I did my master's degree while I was working full time. And it's where I wanted to be and wanted to stay. And so the path through my career was intentional in that sense. Where it was not quite as intentional is when that path would come to an end. I knew retirement was out there, but I really didn't think about it too much. I just knew that I loved what I was doing. And so I kept my head down and kept doing it. Were it not for my grandfather, I would not have financially been able to retire. And my grandfather passed 20 years ago. So that'll give you an idea of the influence that a person can have at a critical point in time in your life. He was very, very proud of me. I'm first in my family to go to college. I come from a very low income in terms of my upbringing. And so college was not even a dream, but he was so proud that I had achieved that. And I remember him sitting me down and saying, now the first thing you need to do is start saving for retirement. And I just laughed because at that point I was a clerical assistant 3. That was my first job in the CSU, a position that doesn't even exist anymore. And I was damn glad to have it. Let me just say that. Okay. And I won't go into that story because it'll take the whole time. But that was my first position. And I think I was making $26,000 a year. And I said to my grandfather, I can't afford to save. And he really, really drilled it for me, the importance of planning for the future. And so I did. I started with a monthly contribution to my 403B, right? That higher ed equivalent of a 401k, $20 a month. And that $20 hurt, but it only was 17 taken out of my paycheck because it's pre-tax savings. But anyhow, that started when I was 28 years old. So fast forward 30 years and increasing that contribution over the years, that made a really interesting, significant investment in addition to the pension, which is a wonderful thing from the CSU. I will just say that. So my intentions for retirement were that was something that I would do down the road. Financially, I'm glad I saved for it. Emotionally, I'm not sure that I did. So I served on 3 different Southern California campuses, San Marcos, Fullerton, and then Pomona. And that journey led me from being a clerical assistant 3 to being a vice president for student affairs with a lot of positions in between. And my identity, as Gary referenced, was very much wrapped around this notion of serving an institution, serving students, and being of service to the higher education environment. And so when my final position didn't go the way that I'd hoped it would, I ended up moving from Pomona to the chancellor's office and knew that I would miss students. Still didn't have thought that I was going to retire anytime soon, but realized that it was not the environment for me. So I started planning for retirement. In other words, I really seriously started looking at what would it look like if I retired at 30 years. And what I discovered is that my 30 years was going to land right smack dab in COVID. And in the position that I was in and what I was doing, working with all health and wellness areas across the 23 campus system, it was just more than I wanted to give of myself. So I made the decision, okay, I'm going to step out. As I was realizing that I was going to do that ultimately, I started looking around for what would I like to do outside of working for the CSU. And I came to understand that the word retirement didn't really fit me. So what I redefined or reframed that as I retired from the CSU. I did not retire from my service to higher education because I'm not ready to do that. I know, as John Hoffman said to me in one really poignant mentoring moment, you're not finished, Leah. I don't know what's next, but I know you're not finished. And he was right, as he often has been over my life. So I actually started doing consulting with a couple of friends who were running their own consulting groups and said, hey, I need somebody to help on this project. And so did a couple of projects and thought, wow, that's really neat. I like that. Maybe I'll start my own consulting gig when I'm done with this higher ed thing. Like Henry, I've realized I don't want that responsibility. I will be a member of somebody else's consulting group and do a project and contribute to a report, but I'm not going to do that full time. But I also realized that being in the classroom was something that I loved over the years and had the opportunity to do in the master's program at Fullerton when I was working on that campus. And so I realized that going back to the classroom would probably be of interest. And so I started teaching at APU after I retired. And I've taught in both their master's and their EDD program. And I continue to do that today. And I love it. So I see teaching as something that I will continue. I'm thinking about coaching because I've been mentoring people my whole life, as Henry has mentioned, but I don't know if I want to do that for pay or not. So that's something I'm kind of looking into and considering. I also realized that volunteering, which has been a part of my life, my whole higher ed career, was something I seriously wanted to continue. So as Henry mentioned, I'm on the NASPA Foundation board, and I've started doing some work for NASPA Advisory Services, serving as a subject matter expert and a facilitator. And that's been really fun. And so those are some projects that I've done. I also realized that when I did finally decide to retire December of 21, that I needed to take the calendar year of 22 and focus on health. So I've had some health challenges over the last 6 years with some back issues that have been really difficult to navigate while I was working full time and had the pressures of those leadership positions. And so this year I've really been focused on how can I get my back healthier. I also knew that it was going to be an important year of emotional health for me and my family because my mom's health was failing. And indeed, my mom did pass in September last month. So that I'm grateful for the fact that I wasn't working full time and was able to be with her for a month prior to her passing away because she lived on the East Coast. And I also have a 2-year-old 4-legged child. Her name is Chloe. She is the chocolate Labrador that I've wanted my entire career, but knew that I did not have the time to invest in raising her. And so she is my pandemic gift. I've had her now almost 2 years, and we're in training together. I don't take her to dog training. We go to training together so we can learn how to coexist, and she can be the dog that I know she's capable of being. And I currently have her in a program to be registered as an emotional support animal to go into environments, including hospitals, to work with children, because my niece, who passed 5 years ago, was the benefactor of dogs who came in and gave her love and care. And I want to give back to the health environment by doing that. So it has been a journey for me, one that I didn't necessarily see coming when it did, but I am looking at all the aspects of it that I have to be grateful for. I am loving what Gary mentioned. I am in charge of my own time. And I love that. I can breathe deeper in a way that I haven't in a really long time. I am financially fine. So I'm grateful to my grandfather, my bosses, my mentors, who over the years kept telling me, take advantage of all the free investment advice that you have available to you through programs through the CSU. And so I followed their lead and did all those things and went to all my TIA craft meetings and all of that, and found out, like, oh, wow, I can actually do this thing called retirement. And I'm loving having the opportunity to experience life in a different way that I never saw coming. So future stories to be told, but that's me, and happy to answer questions after Jill shares with us her journey.
Great. Well, I think that all I need to say about my journey, having been at the same institution for 33 years, is the only thing that's really different in general from what everybody else has shared is that I did not see my journey coming as soon as it did. So I was, in hindsight, due to the great financial abilities of my husband, I was able to retire early at 55. And but I really didn't see that coming. It was due to a circumstance on the Irvine campus that I found myself in. And when looking at there were things that were going to take place that were going to affect others on our campus. And I know you're supposed to look out for yourself first, but that's difficult for me. So I took a look at that and talked with my husband and looked around at how the university was changing and what I wasn't quite comfortable with and what I knew was coming at us at the UC system, and I think all of higher ed. So I decided to jump with with not a lot of notice and not thinking that I was going to do that. So it was within under a year. And since my former boss is on this, I will say that it was a very difficult, and I'm being very honest, it was a very difficult decision to make fairly quickly. I had the best job in the world. So, and I'll believe that till the day I'm no longer here. So anyways, what I'd like to do now is let y'all, in using the chat, maybe to ask some questions, whether it's follow-up questions, new questions. We've got a lot of knowledge out here and obviously a lot of stories. NASPAites always have a lot of stories. So I'm just going to sit here and stare at the chat till someone puts it. No, there's other things we can talk about. But I'm hoping that folks have questions. I can see all of you. Hello. Well, most of you.
While they're thinking, Jill, I wanted to add that
yeah.
I forgot to mention that I did serve one semester as acting vice president at Compton College in the fall of 21. And I made the comment recently that I didn't like it. And my wife corrected me and said, you loved the job, you hated the commute. And I had to think about that. And she was right. I loved when I was actually on the campus, I loved it. And I loved working with the staff for the 4 months, but the commute was killing me. And that's what I didn't like. And so I only did it for one semester. That was what I had committed to. And that's all I could work, actually, because of the state teacher, the STIRS retirement maximum you could earn. But I love the job. And also to piggyback on what Gary and Leah said, I have a daughter who's just started working in higher education herself this past year, just finished her first year at Harvey Mudd. And we explained to her the importance of investing in her future retirement. And so she has started that, and she understands, because she could understand why her mom, who didn't work for 15 years, could retire at 55 like Jill and receive a pension. And I said, because she spent 18 years in the system and never touched the money. So it grew for 33 years. And so she actually has a retirement. So that was an aha moment for her. So I encourage you, because I didn't start planning for my retirement until 37, when I became the dean of students at Santa Ana College. So I didn't really think about it, because, oh, you don't need to think about retirement. But the sooner you think about it, the better. And so she started now at 24, and she's going full bore for it. Because I told her, just like everyone else, if you have a pension and you have retirement monies, you'll be so much better off when you turn 55.
True. Okay, y'all. NAFSAites, I know you have questions, comments, jokes.
I'm going to throw out a question to the group.
Okay.
What brought you to this session? There must have been something about the topic that touched a nerve for you, or made you curious about something. So let's hear from you.
And you can unmute and just, we don't have to go through chat for that. So great question, Leah, because you never know if we're saying the right things, giving the right info, that people are getting something out of the session.
I could play teacher and call on somebody, but I would much prefer much prefer to hear what you have to say.
I'll go.
All
so
right,
hi everyone, Ellen Whitehead, and I'm now at UCI. I'm learning that. So I've been in the UC system for just over 16 years, and they definitely working in these systems, the pensions are great and it's hard to leave, but luckily I feel that I love working for the UC system and the campuses that I've been at. And so, I'm just always, thinking about the future. In my mind, I can retire in 13 years at 60. And so that's my goal, right? It's like, that's my plan. So I just always like to learn and listen from folks and I never really thought, like, I have no idea what I'm going to do at that time. I always think, travel, that's when I'll really travel a lot, but you never know what could happen, right? So I don't know. So I just popped in to listen and learn. So thank you for sharing your stories. Very inspiring.
The only word I would share with you, Ellen, is reciprocity. So you don't have to stay in the UC system. You can get reciprocity with CSU,
Yes.
With community colleges. So just understand that. Don't feel like, you love UC, stay there. But if you had an opportunity, please understand there is reciprocity. And the reciprocity works well because they will pay you at the highest salary from either institution.
Yes. Yeah, I also a tip that I have is, and I'm sure you all do this, I meet with the benefits person at whatever campus I'm at, and I'm like, okay, this is my plan. What tips do you have? And before I accepted the job at Irvine, I met with them, and I was a finalist for a job at a CSU, and they were like, okay, I recommend this, but call me before any other offer, so really making connections with your benefits people to work out those logistics too is so critical. If you really want to maximize like that pension and your long-term impacts, but definitely I think you got to work at a place that's fulfilling and meeting your needs holistically. But it's nice to have that pension within the systems.
Ellen, you could give this workshop, or this presentation. You could give this presentation because you are doing exactly what we all did, which is points along the way you started thinking about things and talking to people, and that's really what it's all about. If you have a plan, then you have retirement already set. It doesn't matter if the plan changes, you've got a plan, right? My plan was to work until 63 because I thought, wouldn't it be kind of cool to retire at 63 because I was born in 63? So that's how intentional I was. I was like, that's kind of a cool age and a cool, neat thing. And it happened a lot sooner than that, but that's okay. I had a plan, right? And I did like you. I asked all the questions I could think of.
One of the things you mentioned was the issue of travel. And that's one of the things that I decided that I wanted to do when I retired was to travel. And so when I retired, and the first year I retired, we didn't travel because, again, I was trying to figure out, could I afford to even, eat? and would all have, but once I figured out that, yeah, we're just fine. I budgeted $1,000 a month for international travel and $12,000 a year. And I've increased it since then, but every year since then, we've taken an international trip and we've gone somewhere, and we've been all over the world. We've been to Russia and China and Cuba and South America and Europe and all over anyway. Because that was a priority that I set for myself and something that I wanted to do. And so that's what we did. Until COVID has interrupted that. And so we have not traveled. We had a trip planned for 2020, but we canceled it because of COVID. And so we haven't traveled. And so hopefully this next year we'll start traveling again. But I mean, that you're in charge of you. So you figure out what it is you want to do and do it. And if you have the financial wherewithal to do it. And if you don't have the financial wherewithal, figure out what the alternative is, what you're able to do, what you're not able to do, and have a good life. I mean, this isn't a practice run. This is it, folks. This is what we get to do. So do it and enjoy it.
Yeah, good point, Gary. I just want to read a couple things from the chat. Hi, Dominic. He typed in that he's personally here for the wealth of knowledge and that he's young and just want to take the time to listen. Perfect. Starting young is always the best. So thanks for joining us, Dominic. And hi, Rebecca. Rebecca typed in, this was very interesting to me. I'm here to encourage folks that are retired to consider being on dissertation committees as expert practitioners. Our EDD students at Fullerton need you. Then they ask, let me know if you're interested. Short-term commitment, but that's another interesting way to give back. And I'm glad you're here listening. And I work with the retirees that I know of in Region 5 and 6 and I'm leaving at the end of this year, but have been doing that for 2 or 3 years now. And there are people who are willing to work and help on a short-term basis, so connect with me, and hopefully I can get you that list or send something out to folks and see if folks would be interested in helping. But it is nice. I just want to say one funny thing. So I do a volunteer gig at a used bookstore that's associated with our library here in Irvine because I love to read. So I go in and I volunteer. And so they asked me to be on their board, and I'm a higher ed professional. Sure. Okay. What do you need? And it's amazing to me with our skill set, nobody on that board knew how to program an event. And I had to laugh because I said to them, I said, that's like breathing for any of us in higher ed. And they're like, okay. And in addition to that program, can you start a scholarship program? Because nobody else is from a higher ed background. Not that I know anything about or enough about scholarships, but it's interesting. Our talents can definitely be used. I thought everybody could program an event, but oh well. Okay, Ramin, you have your hand up. I'm calling on you. How are you?
Good. I just want to, first of all, thank the panel for their wisdom that they're providing here today. As somebody that is getting up there, close to retirement, hopefully at some point, one of the things is I do like to travel as well. So, what you said, Gary, resonates with me. And I think for probably a lot of people, they have visions of traveling a lot when they retire. But I also know that as I get older, I have a lot more aches and pains and, the body starts to wear down. So I'm kind of curious about is it actually better to just travel now and try and squeeze as much in at this age versus, I'm able-bodied luckily right now. And I just played basketball this morning actually, but 5 years from now, I'm not sure. And I certainly, have lots of more aches and pains than I did, when I was 20, 30 or 40. So I'm just curious about how would you have done something differently perhaps, or you're more like, no, that would have been the right time to travel because I can extend my time or whatever.
It would be really wonderful if we could live our life backwards, so we knew exactly when we could do different kinds of things. But the reality is we don't live our life backwards. We live them forwards. I would have loved to have started traveling when I was in high school or college or whatever. That wasn't in my economic, that just wasn't in my worldview at that point in time. And I couldn't have done that. I wasn't really I was in college before I ever took an airplane flight, and I went all the way to Chicago, and my God, that was this wonderful kind of thing. This strange place called Chicago. But you have to decide for yourself what you think and what you project, what your health is going to be like in 5 years. Obviously, you don't know. I don't know. I mean, we just do what we can do as best we can, but you know sort of your physical capabilities now. You can make some kind of reasonable projections about what you think you might be like in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years or whatever the case may be. And so that's part of the challenge of retirement, is figuring out what you can and can't do. And yes, as you get older, the aches and pains and the physical capabilities diminish. There's no two ways out of it, unfortunately, but that's part of biology. But do what you can do, and do as much as you can as early as you can, but at the same time recognize that you have the rest of your life, however long that may be, to do what you can do. But enjoy as best you can and do as much as you can when you can.
And I want to interject too, because I've known people who said, well, I have all these plans for my retirement, and they retire and they die. And so I have always stressed to my team, quality of life, family first, your education second, your job third. And please understand, job third. Nothing's more important than your family or education. And education doesn't end with a terminal degree either. You can always learn. But I agree, take advantage of opportunities you have now. And you don't have to have the wherewithal to take a day trip to, and I just, since Dominic says he's at Cal State Fulton, he could take a day trip to just Long Beach and walk around, Pine Street. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do that don't cost you a lot of money, but don't ignore your own quality of life. And even at a young age, and a lot of us who have children have had the opportunity. My daughter studied in Europe, and I was jealous because I'd never even been to Europe. So here she is studying in Paris, and I'm thinking, wait, what's wrong with this picture? I've never left the country to go over there, yet she's studying in Europe. So I think we want to provide for our children, but we also have to take care of ourselves. And so for the younger professionals here, take advantage of any opportunity you have, not just to travel, but to do some things that you said, oh, maybe when I retire, maybe when I'm a little bit older. Hey, the time is now. There's no wait for older. Do it now. Take advantage of it.
Okay, we have a few more minutes, but Leah, did you want to say something? I saw you unmuted yourself, but
No, I'm
okay.
Or I will say yes. We do that, right? We say no and then we say something. Yes.
Yes.
I completely want to underscore and agree with what both Gary and Henry have said. I do wish that I had prioritized taking vacation and having experiences while I was working over the last 30 years. I wish that I had done that. And so I'm doing as much as I can now, but could not have foreseen 6 years ago that suddenly I would have a back issue. Never saw that coming. No, nobody in my family has that. And that has become an issue that has limited somewhat of what I can do. So do not waste time. It's your most precious, precious commodity.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point, Leah. And let me just, when you're working, the currency of the realm is money. When you're retired, the currency of the realm is time. So I'm not so much worried about how I spend my money, but I am worried about how I spend my time.
Yeah.
And that's the key resource in retirement. It's your time. Everybody has the same amount of time, 24 hours a day. That's what we all have. It's how you want to spend that time that's really the key in retirement. And you make those choices. You decide how you're going to spend your time. So time is the currency of the realm in retirement.
Well said.
Yeah, hear, hear.
So I saw, Rebecca, your note about semester at sea, and I know that Ramin has done that because I had a little chat with him about that a few years back, but I'd love to have folks who have done this talk about it some.
And just be aware that Ramin's session is up next at 10 o'clock. So it's 9 minutes to 10. So maybe Ramin, we can wrap this up with your comments on semester at sea.
I hope my session's at 11, because if it's at 10, then I'm in trouble. It's actually at 11, Jill. But that's
Oh, is
okay.
it at 11?
Oh,
We were
yeah.
told it was at 10.
I can talk about semester at sea because I'm going next fall. So, you know, I did sail once, and it's great to see that Rebecca sailed before, and there are other people in the room, I think, that have done it perhaps. So, you know, it is a great opportunity if you can. A lot of times it's about your institution, if they're willing to allow you to basically be gone for a quarter or a semester. If you have an institution that's supportive, I say take advantage of that opportunity, because to me, it's like a sabbatical. And in fact, I actually believe student affairs professionals should get sabbaticals. I don't understand why faculty get it and student affairs staff don't. I mean, we work really hard. We are really talking about mental health and being drained and you know, all of the issues that have been really popping up quite a bit the last few years. And for me, when I left and I came back, I was really rejuvenated. I was energized by it. And even though I was working on the ship, and you know, there's all kinds of drama, and you know, you're working. But when I came back, it was refreshing. It was something different. It was something unique. And obviously, I was blessed to go to a number of different countries and meet new students and be energized by the energy of that community. But you know, and so it's one opportunity. If anyone wants to ever talk about semester at sea, you know, send me an email, rtalesh@uci.edu. You can look me up. I'm more than willing to talk about it more. But I do agree. It's the kind of program that allows you to kind of do both loves, I guess you could say. Working with students, making impact on people's lives, and seeing the world, and really understanding your place in the world. And this is a big place, and seeing how different people live and interact, and cultures, and really kind of expand your horizon. So I'm a big fan, but of course I had to work with a lot of folks that had to give up their job, or you know, oh, I'm an RD and I'm leaving NYU because they're not going to hold my job, and so I'm unemployed while I'm on the ship. So you know, if you have an institution that supports you through that, if you can build that in and talk about, and I think it really has helped me as a staff member, as a dean of students right now, because I'm able to pick up conversations with people, international students, students that have traveled. You know, there's just different ways you can connect with people differently when you have had those experiences. I can talk about Cuba, I can talk about Brazil, I can talk about Russia. I mean, you know, and having been there and having, you know, experienced that a little bit, got a taste of it, I guess you could say. So yeah, I'm a big fan. But you know, I'm not necessarily just saying it for semester at sea. Any type of travel, I think, is important and is helpful, and it makes us more well-rounded.
Absolutely.
That's great. Thank you, Ramin. And I want to say that sometimes when people talk about travel, and I have this in my head, although I'm much better now, they think they have to travel a long distance, like it's, you know, that Europe, South America, whatever. Somebody said earlier, you know, go to Long Beach. I used to, whenever I went to the NASPA National, I tried to stay an extra night and take a local tour, go to a local museum. There's an awful lot in the United States, which probably a lot of us found out during COVID. And so any of those opportunities that you can build on, I think you need to do that. And that's not as much money as current airfare to Europe. Thank you very much. Okay, Daniel, are you still there? Hello, Daniel.
Yes, I am.
Hi, Daniel. So we're wrapping this up, and I thought my Ramin session was at 10. Is it at 11? Can you clarify? I can't find my calendar.
It's at
Yes.
11. I just looked at the flyer.
Okay, it is at 11. All right. Well, we still hope you come on back and listen to Ramin and learn from his wonder. Okay, I'm really sorry. Ramin and I are friends, and so
you know, Jill, okay, just say it, Jill. You know, I was a student when Jill worked at UCI, so it was always weird when later I supervised Jill.
It wasn't weird. You let me do what I wanted to do.
That's right. I knew my line. She had a lot of authority back then.
Okay, well, thanks everybody. It is about 5 to 10, so unless there are any other burning questions or comments, thanks for joining us. I don't know if they do little surveys or evaluations. They may, but we've got some good info from you all as to why you came on here, and we'll build from that for the future. So thanks so much. I hope everybody has a great weekend. Happy Halloween. You know, whatever. Just be happy.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Thank
care.
you.
Bye-bye all.
See ya.
Thank you, Jill.
Thanks,
You're
Jill.
welcome.